This fall, we'll go further than ever before. Enterprise launches Wednesday, September 26th on UPN.
It's been a long road, my friends. 22 years, in fact, since Enterprise first graced our screens back in 2001. And sure, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened in the meantime, but I wanted to do a little, birthday celebration or something along those lines here. So none of this is scripted. I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head, which is par for the course for this channel, to be honest. So none of this is going to be too well put together, but I did want to just get on and share a couple of my thoughts, memories, and opinions on Enterprise. You know, the show that starred Archer, Hoshi, Trip, Phlox, Mayweather, T'Pol, Reed, Porthos, and of course Shran. Now obviously there was other characters of import in there that we saw now and again, but those are probably the primary ones. However, I would be quite remiss if I didn't mention the beautiful NX-01, which may very well be my favorite starship design from Star Trek, but I think the NX-01 just holds such a special place in design history and looks so great to me. And it's actually the first starship model I believe I ever bought. Think back all those years to 2001 when this show was first starting to premiere. I was in high school. Actually, I think I was in middle school at that point when I remember going online in the computer lab, looking up all these sorts of leaks and images and all these little things before the show came out in the little brief periods of time I had between classes or in my typing class or whatever I was doing where I wasn't actually supposed to be looking at the internet. And I was very enthralled with trying to figure out what was going on with Enterprise. And I do remember some other things along the lines of people speculating online that Enterprise was actually going to be set in the mirror universe all along. Now, I don't know if that's something that kind of stuck with the show throughout its run, but I do feel that that was a very genuine concern, or at least theory people were saying at the time, oh, this isn't my Star Trek. This is too dark. It's clearly being set in the mirror universe, and that's going to be a big twist somewhere down the line. The show, in and of itself, absolutely had some problems. It had some growing pains. What show didn't? What Star Trek didn't? But I am always a fervent defender of season 1 of Enterprise. A hell of a lot of people out there say it's boring, the characters were not great, they acted out of character, they were stilted, blah 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 blah. I think that the lack of interesting missions, at least after that first pilot episode, was very appropriate. It would be going out into space. You're not going to 100% run into all the most exciting, fascinating things right off the bat. You're going to have a slow start. You're going to encounter worlds that are just slugs or rocks or storms, and you get stuck in a cave and you start hallucinating. I liked those episodes. I liked that little slow burn start. Now, granted, we were kind of under the wing and under the protection of the Vulcans, so it was kind of a little bit disingenuous to feel like we were actually exploring space for the first time without a safety net. That's actually something I would have liked to see in the show, having us explore things that were absolutely unexplored. I know that came a little bit later on, but to have that little Vulcan over the shoulder thing did feel a little less like it was a mysterious region of space, but it was fascinating to see these people dealing with and encountering all of these varied species, planets, technologies, and being the underdog, not being this secure force in the galaxy like we had seen in most of Star Trek.
The first crew to explore deep space paved the way for generations to come. The final frontier has a new beginning. Enterprise, this fall on UPN.
Now, I also know that the original thought was to have this set entirely on Earth in Season 1. I don't think I would have enjoyed that. Similar to how I don't like the idea of a Starfleet Academy show, I don't think I would have liked an entire year being set on Earth trying to develop this Warp 5 program, get the ship off the ground, blah, blah, blah. I think that would have been a mistake. But based on the response and how the show actually lasted and worked out, I'm not so sure. Maybe it would have been worth trying that risk back then, instead of trying to go with a more tried and true but edgy take on Star Trek. Now, this is a 100% genuine and accurate recreation of what happened that very first time the theme song came on, that infamous and or famous theme song. Here's what happened. It's been a long, long... I guess it just went to commercial without a title sequence? Okay.
Getting from there to here.
Did that just say Enterprise?
It's been a long time, but my time is finally near.
I don't know if I like this.
'Cause I've got faith
Okay, this is the best theme song ever. I love it. Now, maybe I'm looking back through rose-tinted glasses, but I do remember liking the song right out of the gate after that little warming up period. Now, granted, through hindsight, that may be a memory that's a little bit distorted, but I also remember, and if the copyright gods allow me, I will show you a little bit of that as well, but at the time, this was being promoted heavily with very contemporary music.
As a boy, his destiny was in the stars.
Where no man has gone before.
Now, he'll be the first captain to explore the final frontier.
So it didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. It was kind of how they were trying to integrate Enterprise as a more, I don't know, this isn't your father's Star Trek, this is a more edgy, modern-day type of a version of it, and I think that it worked for what it was trying to do. It has definitely cemented itself as a talking point of the series, whether you love it, whether you hate it. That is something you can point to as a selling point or a staying away point of Enterprise, so it is giving it a more long-lasting impact. I very much liked the introductions of some of the characters. For whatever reason, that Hoshi sequence always sticks out to me. I also remember that first sequence of, I think it was Reed and Mayweather first looking at the transporter and kind of talking about how it's just been approved for biomatter.
I presume you mean fruits and vegetables.
I mean armory officers and helmsmen.
I remember the introduction of Phlox working on the Klingot that had crash-landed on Earth. Obviously, there was all those Suliban subplots going on in the Temporal Cold War, which kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, but I was here for it. Again, I was a kid, so I wasn't necessarily as discerning. This was just new Star Trek on my screen that I was watching. Now, Voyager I had been watching, right before this came out, so I was very much into that whole generation. So it was kind of a nice change of pace to have this drastic departure and kind of had this edgy Star Trek. I know I've said that 32 times, but they were definitely trying to push that with all the decon chamber scenes and whatever.
Before Janeway and Picard. Before Sisko, Spock, and Kirk. The Star Trek saga began.
So I was very fascinated. I definitely felt like it was different. It wasn't the TNG I grew up with. It wasn't the Voyager I grew up with. And at that point in time, I was kind of meh on DS9. I thought it was the weird religious stepchild that was only on Sunday mornings, or I think it was Sunday at like 1 o'clock or something. They would show DS9 reruns where I was. So I always felt like that was just this weird push to the side Star Trek they weren't really promoting very well. Obviously, going back and watching it now, it holds up fantastically, and it's one of my favorite Star Trek series ever with some of the best characters. But that aside, this is about Enterprise, and say what you will about how Enterprise ended, how they changed things in season 3 and 4, all of that stuff. I think all 4 seasons of Enterprise hold up quite well. Now, some of the characters, specifically Hoshi and Mayweather, as the series progresses, kind of get less to do, and I know that's not necessarily a detriment to Enterprise as a whole. Star Trek didn't start out as an ensemble piece. In TOS, it was never an ensemble piece, so I feel like they were also trying to push that kind of thing here. They were trying to give, the Trip to Paul Archer relationship the forefront, and then you had some of the other characters. Phlox, for whatever reason, was also a breakout that tended to have a lot to do. And then, of course, you bring in a Shran, and whenever Shran's on screen, it's just a spectacle to behold. Really wish we could have gotten that 5th season to see Shran as a main cast member and the NX-01 refit. Those two things would have just been fantastic. We did get to see the NX-01 refit a couple of times in the modern day Star Trek, even if it's just a blink and you miss it kind of cameo thing in Picard Season 2 and also Picard Season 3. There was a little bit of that, so we'll take what we can get. You could absolutely do a continuation of Enterprise right now if they wanted to, and have as many returning people and new people kind of thrown in there as you can, and maybe have the first fully integrated Federation ship with some of the returning characters, some new characters, maybe some of the characters are in new places, like obviously Archer wouldn't be a captain at this point, maybe he's the president by then. I digress. There is so much they could still do with this show, and it's just such a shame because even from day one, I thought it had great potential. I enjoyed every single episode when they were coming on. Yes, there were a lot of duds. There were ones that don't hold up at all. There was questionable moral choices, decisions that didn't make much sense, terrible characterization, but that's true of almost any Star Trek series, and because this one was cut so short, I feel like it tends to be looked down upon a little bit more for some of those growing pains and some of those stumbles, because when you don't have 7 whole seasons like you do with TNG, DS9, and Voyager, you're kind of cutting it off at season 4. And if you cut off DS9 or Voyager at season 4, that's right after both of those got really good as well, so you're kind of just cutting it off at the knees in their prime. Couple that with the network shenanigans going on, and you really weren't given the chance to grow. But I think Enterprise, out of all of the Trek shows, outside of maybe DS9, is the one that deserves the most reappraisal and the most revisiting, and it's the one that's received the least amount of attention in ancillary stuff. I was trying to gather together some of my Enterprise tchotchkes and paraphernalia, which I'm going to try to show throughout this video, and there's very few Enterprise comics compared to the rest of Star Trek. There were a couple of tie-in novels. There's also a lot less Star Trek Enterprise just action figures, toys. I know there's a little bit, but they were in a different scale. They weren't the Playmates ones at that time. So it just feels like it was never truly treated like part of the family, and it still feels like it's that kind of middle stepping stone between where we left off on Voyager and where we picked up in Discovery. And it's been very infrequently referenced in the other shows, though it has been mentioned several times, especially in the JJ universe, and most recently, very, very directly in Strange New Worlds. And we are getting Connor Trinneer back as Trip in the very questionable, very short Treks, so kind of excited for that, but I am also feeling like it's a very blown opportunity to reintroduce him in a more concrete way. But what are your opinions on Enterprise? Were you a fan of it at the time? Are you a fan of it now? Did you write it off? Leave all those things down below. Like, share, subscribe, throw me some money, do all the fancy YouTube things, and until next time...
So I guess we're through here.
I guess we are. Computer, end program.